Hi, and welcome to Where Are They Now? I am your host, Heather Lindstedt from the class of 1985. Today I am joined by Tom Pedulla, the class of 1971. Tom, so nice to meet you, and thank you for joining me on my show.
And thank you for inviting me, and it's nice to meet you too.
Yes. So, long kind of story of your whole world from where they are now, but did you guys grow up, your family, in Chelmsford, or when did you get into Chelmsford High?
We moved here when I was 4 years old.
Oh, yeah. So you went through
from Somerville. My parents grew up in Somerville. We moved to Chelmsford when I was 4 years old. That was 1958. We moved to Chelmsford. And I started Chelmsford High in September of 1967.
Yeah. And you weren't the oldest in the family, though, were you?
Yes.
You're the oldest?
Yep.
So was there any pressure when you're leading the way into Chelmsford High? Like, you know, do you remember your brothers thinking, like, or asking questions like, what is it like? So how was it when you got to ninth grade?
Yeah, well, I think there was pressure all along being the oldest. You know, I was sort of blazing the trails.
Yeah.
And my brother Paul, who was on this show about a year or so ago, was 2 years behind me. So, yeah, he sort of asked me questions about things. And,
yeah. So to be a salutatorian at the when you graduate, right? You had to have started academically really strong, because and kids forget that, right? The ninth grade, 10th grade actually counts. So
yeah, right.
Did you feel really prepared when you got into high school, from all the, from the middle schools to the elementary schools and the whole process? But what was it like as a ninth grader? Did you have goals, or was it just a love of learning?
Well, yeah, my goals were to get good grades.
Yeah.
I mean, again, being the oldest, my parents really expected a lot and wanted me to achieve. And so, I did love learning too. I mean, I was motivated to learn, and it just sort of came naturally to me. I always got good grades in elementary school, junior high.
Your profession moved into more writing, right, than math. So were you influenced by more English teachers than the math teachers?
Yes, definitely. The one I remember the most is Miss Cusick in ninth grade. She was my English teacher, and she really inspired me. She was down to earth, and later I became the editor of the high school paper, and she was the advisor for the high school paper.
Oh, okay.
So she was definitely a big influence.
And the paper was the Lion's Pride, or what?
I changed the name.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
okay.
It was the Lion's Pride.
Okay.
And I wanted something a little hipper and cooler, so I changed it to the Paper Lion.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what it is now, but.
Okay. And were you like writing every day, or where was that? Or was it just stories that came to mind? How did you see the paper, and how it influenced the culture of the school?
Well, I wasn't writing every day. I wrote stories for every paper, but I had other writers. Bob Sullivan was the sports editor, and he wrote all this, most of the sports stories.
Yeah.
And so I was just helping to organize things. Yeah.
Did you ever? So from that, did you feel like that was a pathway? But you also were in the band, and you had some musical talents. Right.
The band was big. I played clarinet. And I was fortunate enough to make the district band and the all-state band my junior and senior year. And also, I have to say the highlight was probably my senior year. I wrote an arrangement of. I was a big fan of the band Santana.
Yep.
And Santana Abraxas album. I took two songs from that album, "Evil Woman" and "Oye Como Va," and I wrote an arrangement for band. And it really turned out pretty well. We played it in a concert for I think it was for the National Honor Society Assembly or something like that. And I got to conduct the band, which was really kind of an honor.
And who was the music teacher at the time that was influencing you? And because I think that where it is right now, right? You had the English teacher, probably music, that they let you at Chelmsford High kind of explore. And if you had a great idea, they knew that you had the passion for it. So how did that come about, though?
Yeah, well, there were a few, I mean, the band director when I started as a freshman was Don Enos, and he had been there for many years. And somewhere along the line, he retired, he moved on, and we had a guy named Pete Sexauer, and there was another guy too, I forget. But yeah, you know, like Don Enos encouraged me to try out for district and
Yeah.
All-State, for example.
Yeah.
And I needed a push because I remember after I did my first district audition, I didn't think I did very well.
Yeah.
Because I was nervous, and went home and told my mother, oh, I blew it. No way I'm going to make it. And I was really shocked when I found out I made it. So,
How is that? Like when you work so hard at playing an instrument, right? And you're in front of people and or when you're conducting. I mean, that's going to be like, what is the, what goes through your mind? Like, because obviously if you think negative, you're probably going to have the negative, right? Like, but you just said like you went home and said, I blew it. Like what is that strive? Like what do you have to say that you did the best job you could have done?
well, a lot of it is just staying calm, being confident, and staying in the moment with it, and trying not to get ahead of yourself.
Yeah. So was it that one show that you thought I didn't do well, but was that the kind of the springboard to being like finding the way that you wanted to be able to play?
Yeah, after that, the auditions I did went much more smoothly. I sort of got that bad one out of the way, first one off the bat.
First one off the bat.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you still play the clarinet?
No, I don't. No,
Really?
It's been a long time. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. I played in college.
Yeah.
And actually, I was a student conductor of the band in college too. So that was an honor.
So you English, the band, clarinet. You graduate from Chelmsford High, and you decide that Harvard and staying close to home, but Harvard's the place to go.
I went to Harvard. Yep. Again, it was something that I recently wrote a memoir, as you know, and there's a chapter in the memoir I write about my parents when I was maybe about 6 and my brother Paul was about 4, and we're driving on a Memorial Drive, because we used to always go to Somerville to visit my grandparents on the weekends, and we were driving back along Memorial Drive, and we drive past MIT, and my father points and he says, "That's MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's one of the best schools in the whole country." So we kind of look and don't really know what to make of it, you know. And a little while later, we drive by Harvard, and he says, "And this is Harvard University. It's one of the best goddamn schools in the whole world." And then my mother turns around and says, "Wouldn't you boys like to go there someday?" So that seed was planted very young.
Yeah. So at 6 years old, and then you found some pathways. So going to Harvard, and you pretty much knew that you were going to pursue English. Is that kind of the thought?
At the time, I wasn't really sure.
Okay.
I mean, I knew I wanted to go to Harvard. I didn't know I was going to get in.
Okay.
It was very exciting when that acceptance letter arrived. It was
Yeah.
very exciting. And I got there, and I know my parents would have been very happy if I became a doctor.
Okay.
I thought about going pre-med, but I looked at all the courses I had to take to go pre-med. You know, science was never my strong suit, so I said, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And I thought about becoming a music major, but again, I had some talent, but I didn't have the talent that it takes to succeed in the music business, or even as a music teacher. And I always liked...
Was that you telling yourself that, or did somebody tell you that music wasn't your thing?
Well, actually, at Harvard, in order to become a music major, you had to pass a keyboard proficiency test. And I couldn't play the piano at that.
Okay.
I still can't.
Yeah.
So I really couldn't even do it. So I said that door was closed, which was fine. You know, I don't think it would have led anywhere. But I always liked reading. English was always, you know, my favorite subject. I always liked writing. So I decided to major in English. And
when you're talking about your writing, though, was there something that you liked writing about in particular, or so when you went into your career path, being copyright, but you went into teaching, so I assume that when you were teaching, was there ever time? Is there anything that you really love to write about?
Well, not really. I mean, I made a very brief, did a very brief stint as a teacher.
Yeah.
It didn't really work out. And I knew I wanted to be a writer, and that was the problem. I didn't think I had the, I don't know, the inspiration to like write novels or write fiction.
Okay.
I didn't think I had the sort of drive and aggressiveness to be a journalist. So I looked around and I thought, I used to really like the clever commercials on TV, especially in the late 60s, early 70s. That was when sort of the golden age of advertising. There were a lot of really great commercials for the Volkswagen and Alka-Seltzer. And I knew that someone was writing those commercials, and I thought, I bet I could do that.
Yeah.
So I put, at that point I graduated from school, from college.
Yeah.
I had tried teaching, that didn't work out. And I decided I wanted to go into advertising. So I put a book together, a portfolio,
Yep.
just speculative work. And I got my first job in 1976, a little over a year after I graduated. And I was in the advertising business for 23 years.
Is there an ad that you're most proud of?
There isn't one ad, but the series of ads that my art director partner and I did for Payne Furniture, which is an old furniture store in Boston. We kind of repositioned them. We called them America's oldest living furniture store, and we did a series of really kind of humorous, funny ads that ran in the Boston Sunday Globe magazine, and they won a lot of awards. So that's what I'm most proud of.
And there's more awards though than that, right?
Yeah, I won a bunch of awards when I was in the business, both for print, newspaper and magazine and radio and also TV. I think I won over 60 advertising awards. The Hatch Awards, which are for New England,
Yep.
and some national awards, the Clio Awards, the One Show Awards. So I did very well. I mean, I worked at 5 different agencies in 12 years. And at the end of those 12 years, I realized that this wasn't really what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I quit my job and I started freelancing because I decided at that point I wanted to go back to school and become a psychotherapist, because I had started seeing a therapist myself, and I was learning more about who I am and what I want to do. And I found it very helpful. I also started meditating. I was actually in New York on a TV shoot, shooting a big budget TV commercial. This was for NEC Computers. And our campaign theme was "Take It to the Limit." And we paid big bucks for the rights to use that song. I mean, it was $400,000 just to use the rights of that song. And this was back in 1987. So that was a lot of money back in 87.
Yeah.
And we have this 2-day shoot in New York, and it's just, I'm just getting kind of disgusted at all the money that's being spent. And it's just for this commercial that's only going to run a few times during a PGA golf tournament. I thought, I just can't spend the rest of my life doing this. It just feels like I want to do something more. I want to do something more that's in the line of helping people. I mean, my first impulse was becoming a teacher, which I thought I would be a way to help people. I wasn't really suited to be a teacher, but I thought that doing the one-on-one work as a psychotherapist would be much better, suited to my personality. Right. So
but with the ad agency, let me just go back to that big commercial. Yeah. Music has always played a part in your life, though.
Yes, yes.
So when we talk about it, though, like you've talked about meditation, but has music always kind of, I don't know, brought something to you, though? It sounds like it's always inspired you, though.
Yeah, I mean, music is a big part of radio and TV advertising, for sure. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, so the one-on-one, though, in giving back and finding a purpose of giving to people, kind of like teaching.
Right.
So you've got to still have a job, but go to school.
Right. So I quit my job, and I started freelancing.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I thought I would look into, well, what kind of school do I want to go back to?
Yeah.
What kind of degree do I want to get? Am I really going to like this? So I also did some volunteer work in related fields. I worked as for for the Samaritans, the suicide prevention hotline,
Mm-hmm.
to get a feel of what it would be like to work, with people who are, in crisis.
Yep.
And I worked as a hospice volunteer for a number of years, working with patients, through the process of dying.
Dying, yep.
Yeah. And I found that very rewarding too. And in the meantime, my freelance business really took off. I wasn't really trying, but I had a lot of contacts, and freelancing was, I liked it better than working, in the agency world, where
Right.
there's a lot of, competition and cutthroat and
Yep.
pressure. I could work fewer hours. I could sort of choose the jobs I wanted to work on, and I was making as much money as I was making, actually in some cases more money than I was making when I worked
And
for the agency.
when you were freelancing, are you still getting awards and those kind
Not
of
as much,
Not as
not
much.
as much, because you don't get to
Little-
work on the real,
the big things?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still a few.
Right. But you were building your confidence in that, knowing that you were having more of an impact.
Yeah. So it took me about 11 years before I finally went back to school. In the meantime, I met my second wife, and she was a social worker, psychotherapist.
Yeah.
And she was struggling. She had student loans, and she was not getting paid very much. She worked for a community mental health center. So I thought, well, maybe I should just keep freelancing and support her, and I can do volunteer work. And then one day, I went to see my therapist, and I was still talking about wanting to go back to school and become a therapist. And he was sort of encouraging me to, take the plunge. And I went back home, I walked into my kitchen, I looked at the refrigerator, and it was covered with all kinds of, refrigerator magnets and stuff.
Yeah.
And I noticed one that I hadn't seen in a long time. And it was a quote attributed to Gandhi that said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world."
Yeah.
And that just pushed me over the edge. I said, that's it, I'm going to do it. So in 1999, I decided to go to social work school. I went full time
And where'd you go?
to Simmons
Yep.
in Boston. And I went for 2 years. I got a master's in social work. And after that, I did an internship at Cambridge Health Alliance, a fellowship in the program for psychotherapy, where I got a lot of really good training in being a one-on-one psychotherapist. And then I opened up a private practice in Arlington.
So when you say psychotherapist, what is the kind of the definition of that position?
Well, it's working with people who are dealing with psychological or emotional issues that
Yeah.
they want to talk over with somebody. And
Yeah.
it sometimes helps to get feedback, from someone who can identify maybe what your problems are, give
Yeah.
some advice, listen, being a good listener, that
Yeah.
is key. And I was also interested, as I mentioned, I started meditating, and I was interested in this connection between meditation and psychotherapy, which right now is actually a pretty big thing, the world of meditation and psychotherapy.
Yes.
I was invited eventually to join the board of the Institute for Meditation and Psychotherapy. So that was something that not everyone wants to do it, but for patients who are interested, I would, sort of teach them some basic meditations that they could do at home to help them kind of learn more about themselves and calm their minds.
Yep.
One of the big problems with people with any kind of mental illness is just these overactive minds that are throwing out all kinds of, negative thoughts, and meditation can be a good way to help sort of tame that.
Right. So when you're moving towards this whole thing, right, your gut was that, and your passion now becomes, I can handle one-on-ones. Is that, was that the feeling that when you said about the Gandhi quote and stuff like that, it was like, I just want to help one person at a time? Is that?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to help people, and I wanted to work in a helping profession. So as soon as I started social work school, I felt like this is the right place for me.
Right.
I felt like I fit right in. And same once I started working. It wasn't always one-on-one. I also did some groups.
Yep.
I led these mindfulness-based cognitive therapy groups, where it's sort of a combination where you practice meditation skills, but also talk about some of the maybe issues and problems you're dealing with, some of the mental and psychological issues. And those groups were very helpful.
Helpful?
Yeah.
So when you were in class and those kind of things, you're taking those classes, you kind of mentioned like one-on-ones, but then some group stuff. Is it really anything about doing one-on-ones or group, or is it really just being a psychotherapist and that whole work day having success in helping others? Does it really matter what type or what group you're working with?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reward is helping people. And of course, you can't help everyone. There's,
Right.
some people that it's just not a good fit. But overall, I would say that most of the people I worked with did feel like they got better and got some help.
Do you feel like, though, and I'm just going to kind of bring back the worlds, right? Because when you're in copyright and doing the advertising and stuff like that, how good is it? Because you're not seeing my reaction to an ad and those kind of
Right,
things. Is that the thing, like, but doing what you're doing now and kind of influencing, because you're influencing, right?
Right.
Is it knowing the way people walk away from you, right? Is that, but you probably had a great impact, you just didn't know, right?
Yeah, well, there are some parallels because in
Yeah.
advertising, you're trying to influence people too. But you're trying to influence them to buy something
Yeah.
which they may not really need, right?
Yep.
And that's what bothered me.
Okay.
But in psychotherapy, you're trying to influence people to become their better selves.
Yeah.
And that's something you can really feel good about.
So you retired from your practice, but how many years were you in practice by yourself?
Let's see, I started in, altogether, not just private practice, but by the time from the time I started school to the time I retired was 23 years. Because
Okay.
I say I was 23 years in advertising.
Oh, really?
And then 23 years in social work psychotherapy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not many people can split it right down the middle like that.
I know. I didn't plan it that way, but it just kind of worked out that way.
Right, but I'm sure you haven't stopped. So like, what are you still doing right now and giving back and writing and whatnot?
Yeah, well, I'm actually doing a little bit of clinical supervision
Okay.
with some younger therapists.
Yep,
And as you know, I wrote this book
yep.
called Waking Up is Hard to Do. I actually brought this copy for you, Heather.
Thank you,
So,
thank you. So this is the English come full circle though. Your English,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
This is something that I always wanted to do, which was to write a book.
Right, and you just you didn't know the content until
No, I didn't.
Until years of schooling and
Right,
that.
right.
And then, so was it really easy?
I actually co-authored a book with two of my colleagues who are also therapists.
Yeah.
And we wrote a book called Sitting Together, Essential Skills for Mindfulness-Based Psychotherapy. And it was a professional book. It was written for other therapists to show them ways to bring mindfulness and meditation into their work. And I was proud of that, but it wasn't something I was writing from my heart. I mean, all along, I felt like I had this story to tell, this story of, it's really a story about second chances. It's about a second career.
Yep.
It's about a second marriage. And it's about a second spiritual path. I mean, I was brought up Roman Catholic, and I left the church when I was still in high school. I was just really disillusioned with the teachings of the church and the whole thing. And I eventually found the teachings of the Buddha and Buddhism, and I became, that's the kind of meditation I practice. It's called Vipassana, or insight meditation. And it's an ancient Buddhist practice. So yeah, second career, second marriage, second spiritual path, all improvements over the first. So I wanted to write a book that sort of talked about that journey. It's called Waking Up is Hard to Do.
Yeah.
And it says how a long-lost former altar boy found his way home on the Buddha's Eightfold Path. And it was a joy to write. I mean, this is when I retired. I had already started writing before I retired.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what prompted me to retire, maybe a little sooner than I would have otherwise. That and the pandemic, because I really wanted to work on the book.
Yeah.
So I worked on it pretty steadily for like 2 years, and it was finally published this past May.
So is there another book kind of coming?
We'll see.
Like once you
Yeah.
get that, right?
Yeah.
When you finish it, it's kind of like we talked about, and we'll go back to when you played the clarinet, right? You weren't sure, right? That you did well. Hey, Mom, I did not do well.
Right.
And then you got that confidence and you could conduct and all those kind of things. I mean, you conducted at Harvard. Is there another one when you did this? Did you say, this is pretty good, but is there a second one to come?
Well, there might be. We don't know yet. To write this book, I did take some courses, both at Grub Street, which is a school for writers in Boston, and at the Pioneer Valley Writers Workshop. I took a year-long memoir course, and that's really what helped this book come together. And after the course ended, several of us decided to continue meeting as a writers group. So that's giving me a motivation to keep writing. So I've been writing about aging because I've noticed, I'm about to turn 70 next month. I've noticed things are changing in my body and in my mind. I'm not quite as sharp as I used to be. I've had some things go wrong. I had surgery this year on my thumb for arthritis and a few other things that are starting. I can see things are starting to go.
Yeah.
It's only going one way, right? So I'm writing about that, and I'm also bringing in some of the Buddhist philosophy and trying to bring acceptance to that because it's just the way things are. It's just nature unfolding. There's nothing, don't fight it.
Right.
So there may be a book about aging gracefully or aging with wisdom or something like that. But.
Well, I also think, though, that you could add to it because not only are you said you weren't a good teacher, but you know what? You technically are. In the journey that you finally found as a psychotherapist, writing, and that's all teaching.
Yes,
so
true.
it's very interesting that you said, you've kind of done that double thing, but you said you weren't good at something. But I really think, though, Tom, you found your passion. Like you say, oh, I'm not good, but you find a way to make yourself better and more successful. But obviously writing a book and those kind of things and what you're trying to do about even aging and teach others that it does happen and it's going to be there. So I truly believe that you became a great teacher as well. So I totally appreciate you being on this show and love it. And I can't wait to read the book and tell you all about it.
It's all yours.
Thank you so much.
All right. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you. To everybody, thank you for tuning in with Tom and I. We had a great time chatting, and I think you should check out his book. Thank you, and see you soon on Where Are They Now?